Beowulf was the first great work of English national literature. It was composed orally between 700 and 750 AD, but it does depict an earlier time period, which is the early 6th century. It was written down in the 10th or 11th century by a scribe. Beowulf is an example of heroic literature and, as such, is composed of many traditional motifs and recurring elements, some of which include the following. The first one is something called weird, actually spelled W-Y-R-D, and that's what the Anglo-Saxons believed in. They believed that since life was so harsh and unpredictable, living as warriors, that people were subject to the whims of the goddess Weird, or more formally known as fate. Another reoccurring element is the warrior-based society. It was led by a strong warrior chief, and since warfare was the order of the day, and that means between clans, tribes, and even outside invaders, the Anglo-Saxon life was dominated by the need to protect the clan and home from such enemies. Fame and success were achieved through loyalty to a leader, and success was measured by gifts received from those leaders. Lastly, bravery in battle is how one gained their version of immortality. They did not believe in an afterlife. They were not Christians, they were pagans. So they believed one gained immortality through the songs preserved in the collective memory of others. Beowulf is a story that has been handed down orally for generations, so naturally, with that comes changes and embellishments. Those fancy details about impossible feats of courage and strength. Unfortunately, the poet is actually unknown. Many scholars think it was originally told by someone of a pagan religion, which makes sense, and then was then recorded by a monk due to all those Christian elements that are present throughout the entire story. So some of you may be wondering why Beowulf is such an important work of literature, and it's mostly because it's an expression of Anglo-Saxon values and attitudes. So we have the whole idea of warfare being the order of the day, like I mentioned earlier, weird or fate, courage, loyalty, and honor, which were gained through battle, of course, and the battle of good versus evil. So this is the simplest kind of epic, really. This one in particular is a battle between a good warrior and multiple monsters or demons. And then also boasting, which was actually considered a good thing, contrary to our modern beliefs today. And it was only a good thing if you did well in battle. You were successful, you were brave. And then, of course, storytelling. So the bards were the ones who held the key to immortality, as they were the ones who sung about your bravery and the celebration that came afterwards. Another reason that Beowulf is an important work of literature to study is because it is a very typical example of an epic story. It's long, it's a narrative. It details the adventures of a central hero who has supernatural powers. It has a worldwide or cosmic setting, so it's not always on Earth as we know it. It has major battle scenes, lengthy discussions of the hero's weaponry, and participation by God or gods in action. The last reason why Beowulf is an important work of literature is because it's the best example of Old English poetry that we have today. Old English poetry had a 4-beat rhythm, so 4 stressed syllables in each line. It didn't rhyme at all. There was lots of alliteration, kennings, and caesuras. Some other characteristics of Anglo-Saxon poetry include the juxtaposition of the church and the pagan world. As I mentioned before, the Anglo-Saxons were pagans, they worshipped multiple gods. However, the monks were the ones who came in much later and wrote Beowulf down, so they added in references to only one god, and so as you read Beowulf, you can see references to both throughout the text. Also, those kennings that I just mentioned a little bit ago are simply phrases that are an elaborate and indirect way of naming a person, thing, or event. For instance, as we read Beowulf, you're going to hear them refer to the sea as something like the pathless deep or the whale's road. It's never just going to be the sea. Next, I mentioned that alliteration is an important characteristic of Anglo-Saxon poetry, and that means that one or more accented syllables in the first half of the line almost always alliterate with one or more accented syllables in the second half of the line. Thus, alliteration then binds the two halves of the line together. Anglo-Saxon poetry also has a tendency towards didacticism, which means it is very preachy, it teaches a moral or a lesson, and that's probably because the monks added that as well when they added in the Christian elements. And because of this, it is something we called elegiac, meaning that the whole poem has a really sad, somber tone as a result. Beowulf follows what we call the hero's adventure cycle, which most stories follow this format as well, so you should always be looking for it. I want you to specifically look for it in Beowulf as we read the text, though. The first step in the hero's adventure cycle is something called the call to adventure, and that means that something is going to call the hero to the adventure. So maybe there's going to be a problem, and the hero is going to have to come in and say, I'll save the day. And there will be helpers and tempters along the way throughout this adventure cycle. So people who help our hero throughout the adventure, but also people who try to pull the hero away from the task at hand. The second part of the hero's adventure cycle is something called the threshold, and that's where our hero is going to have to show what they're really made of. So they're going to face their first conflict. This could be a physical fight, it could be a mental fight, and they are usually successful at this point. Then there's multiple trials after that. So multiple challenges the hero will have to face in order to prove their worth and help people who need to be rescued. The fourth part of the hero's adventure cycle is called the Abyss, and this is going to be our hero's lowest point. They actually may not even be successful, so if it is a physical battle, this might be where they actually die. They don't make it, but they do save all of the people who needed to be saved. Atonement is next in the hero's adventure cycle, and this means that as a result of this adventure, the hero has become a changed person. They no longer have the same outlook on life that they did prior to this. So maybe they learned an important lesson or something like that. The sixth and last part of the hero's adventure cycle is called the return, and the return is when the hero goes back home. So maybe they were in a different land or world, or just in the next city, but now they go back home and they take those lessons with them, and we have a concluding element to our story now. Alright, now we're ready to begin reading Beowulf. You should know that the setting is specifically Denmark, sometime between the 7th and 10th century. We're at Heorot, which is a character named Hrothgar's mead hall. He is a leader. the king of his tribe. And he has just built a great mead hall, which is where they celebrate after big battles. And it is being terrorized by a vicious monster named Grendel. So maybe you can see where this is going. Maybe you can see what Beowulf's call to adventure might be.